All right, so we spent the last two times talking about how to solve systems of linear equations in three variables. And you're using substitution elimination, and so doing so by hand. Your calculator will do this for you as well, your graphing calculator. So you'll need to have your graphing calculator for this particular set of notes. So if you want to stop the video for a sec, go grab it, come back, then that's okay. Okay, so let's go through and talk about how to use your calculator. And then we're going to get into a couple of story problems too. And story problems for three equations, three unknowns are just like any other story problems. Just got to kind of develop your own process for writing out your equations. But there are situations where you need three equations and three variables. Okay, we'll take a look at those. All right, so the notes, hopefully you've gotten a hold of those or you've printed them off. But in the notes, it walks you through a step-by-step process for using your calculator. I'm going to actually show you with the calculator how to do that. And so just know that the steps in the notes can help you as you're doing your homework and whatnot. Okay, so bringing a calculator over. All right, we want to solve that first equation, this guy right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to create what's called a matrix. A matrix is just a way to organize numbers into rows and columns, and it's going to end up looking like this, right? And the matrix, the way this works is that you have dimensions. This is a 3 by 4 matrix because it has 1, 2, 3 rows. We always name it, give it dimensions by the rows first. And then obviously 1, 2, 3, 4 columns. And so we call it a 3 by 4 matrix. And we're going to use a 3 by 4 matrix because we have 1, 2, 3 equations to be our rows. And our columns are going to correspond to our variables. 1, 2, 3, and then we have a column for our constants. Okay? So that's why we use the 3 by 4. So we need to create a 3 by 4 matrix in our calculator. Okay? To do that, all of your matrix functions are going to be found under the second x to the negative 1 button because that's where the blue word matrix sits. So we're going to go second x to the first, and here you're going to find and I've already created a couple of matrices, but you're going to find this is a list of all your matrices. These are all the ones that you can create. The next, if you arrow to the right, this is all of your math functions you can do with matrices. You can add them and subtract them and multiply them and create what are called identities and all that kind of stuff. And then if you arrow over one more, this is where you edit them. This is where you create them. So I'm going to create matrix A, which I've already got, but if I hit enter, what you're probably looking at is just 1, 0 here. It's a 1 by 1. So what you're going to do is you're going to hit 3, enter, and then 4, enter, and it will create a 3 by 4 matrix full of zeros. Okay? Now what you're going to do is basically type in the coefficients to all of your variables and all of your equations, this being equation 1, this being equation 2, and this being equation 3. Just the coefficients, making sure that you take the sign. So if it's a minus 2x, you're going to put in a negative 2, right? And so we're just going to type these in order. So again, if we, I'll bring that equation back up. Go back to this guy. The coefficients are 1, negative 2, 3, and then your constant is 18. And so that's how your first row should look. And then so on and so forth, right? So let's go create that. So one, so when we hit 1, enter, and if you see it spits you out to the right, just to continue in the same equation here. Negative 2, 3, and 18. Looks like I had this system already in, but I'll go ahead and type them in anyway. So 9, 2, negative 1, and negative 2. And then we go negative 6, negative 1, 2, and 4. And so that's what our matrix should look like. Okay? Now that we've created it, we've got to get out of this. So we go second, and then the blue word quit is above the mode button. So we want to quit back out to the main screen. Then we go back into matrix menu, so second, x to the negative first. And we want to perform a mathematical operation, so we arrow over to the right. And we're going to ask the calculator to do what's called a row reduction. So RREF is row reduction. And basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to get our matrix to where it has ones in a main diagonal with a column of numbers. Okay? And I'll show you what I'm talking about once we get it to pop up. So we're going to choose RREF. That's the one we're always going to choose here. And then we have to go choose our matrix. So we go second, x to the negative first again. We've typed in our stuff into matrix A, so I'm going to choose A. And I'm going to hit enter again. And here's what we mean by row reduction. So when we typed all of those coefficients in for our equations, the calculator has now taken that and has manipulated the rows. That's why it's called row reduction. By adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing rows, merging rows. It's kind of weird, but basically we're trying to get ones in this diagonal, zeros everywhere else, with this last column basically giving us our solutions. This is column X, so I go to the row that has a 1 in that column, and that's going to tell me what my X coordinate is. So X is 1. This is my Y column, so Y is negative 4. This is my Z column, so Z is 3. So the solution here is going to be 1, negative 4, and 3. Okay? And that is our solution. And it's that easy. That's how that works. Okay? We've got a few more here for you to try. And now that we know how to do this, when you're doing your story problems, feel free to use your calculator to solve them. The story problems, the thing that we're trying to get you guys to do is to be able to write equations to create the system. And so then you can go into your calculator and just do this row reduction for a matrix and get to solutions much, much easier. Okay? Now, I want to show you one other thing that your calculator would. Sorry about that. I want to show you one other thing that your calculator will do for you. And that's in the case that you may get decimals for your answers, for your solution, right? So go in and create your matrix. If you want to stop the video, that's fine. Create your matrix for this system. I'll say this: when you create your matrix, you see this? Equation 3 is missing an x. If you're missing a variable, then you want to type in a 0 for that coefficient in your matrix in your calculator. You don't want to skip it. You do have to still fill that in, fill that cell in that matrix in, and so fill it in with a 0. Okay? So stop the video, create your matrix, and then feel free to start it back up. Okay, so your matrix should look like this. Again, you should have that 0 sitting right in here to hold a place for that missing x. Okay? All right. Now that you have that matrix in there, we're going to go do our row reduction. So hit second quit, second x to the negative first to go choose our RREF. Then we got to go choose matrix B. And here's our row reduction, and here's supposed to be our solutions. It's a bunch of really long, non-repeating, non-ending decimals. And so we can actually have the calculator put this into fraction form. All we have to do at this point, not doing anything else, all I have to do now is hit the math button, and choose the frac option right here, right at the very beginning. Hit enter. And what this is saying is, okay, I want you to take my answers and I want you to put them in fraction form. Now if you hit enter, it'll give us the matrix again, and now we have fractions that are a lot easier to look at, much more accurate, and even easier to write down. So x is 18 over 37, y is 31 over 37, and z is 116 over 37. Okay? So there you go. Everything you need to know from your calculator. Okay? All right. There is also a slide here for you Casio users. Try to do your best to read through this and figure out how to use your Casio to do the matrices. If you can't, just come see me and I'll walk you through it. The only thing I will add to this is that, yes, pressing the F1 button. So you have to go out to you have to go to Menu and then choose the Run MAT screen. Okay? And in that Run MAT screen, that's where, if you look at the bottom of that screen, you'll see that if you hit F1, that will send you to your matrix menu. Okay? So the other thing I'll tell you is that everything, like down here, everything in a box is what you push. What's in parentheses is what you're choosing when you push that button. Okay? All right. So anyway, you go Menu, Run MAT, and then choose the MAT editor screen by hitting F1. You do need to choose F3. Choose the matrix that you want to edit. Hit F3 for dimensions, and then type in the dimensions 3, 4, 3, execute, 4, execute. It'll create your matrix. And then you can go down and start typing in your equation. Okay? So try that. If it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, just come in and see me. It won't take us long to figure to work through it. Okay? All right. Got another one here for you. Try out your calculator. Stop the video. Try to figure out how to put everything into your calculator. Or you don't have to stop the video. Just, well, you can. And then check your answers. You should get these as your answers. If you can't, again, come see me. We'll work through your calculator stuff. Okay? Okay, let's take a look at the story problems and some examples of where we need 3 equations and 3 variables. Okay? Story problems, there's no additional trick to these, and unfortunately there's no process that I can give you that's going to work for every story problem. So all we can do is take a look at some examples, and hopefully you develop your own process. But I read through number 4. Monica has 1s, 5s, and 10s in her wallet that are worth $96. If she had one more $1 bill, she'd have just as many 1s as she does 5s and 10s. And she has 23 total bills. Question: how many of each denomination does she have? So what that means is I have no idea how many 1s she has, how many 5s she has, and nor how many 10s she has. I'm going to need 3 variables. That's my trigger to know that I have to write 3 equations. 3 variables mean I need 3 equations to solve it. Okay? If you're in a non-classroom setting, I mean, you should know you have to write 3 equations because that's what we've been solving. But in a non-classroom setting where it's not that obvious, that's how you're going to know. How many equations you have to write is exactly the same number as how many variables you got. Okay, where are our 3 equations going to come from? Well, first of all, they told us that the bills together are all worth $96. Money, right? How much money would you have after you count up the money? Well, the total amount of money is $96. So when I add the value of the 1s, the 5s, and the 10s together, they have to equal 96. Well, how much money are we going to get from the 1s? Well, the way we would do that is we would count up the number of $1 bills we had and multiply it by 1, which is kind of weird. So the number of $1 bills that she has is X. We're going to multiply it by $1 because that's how much they're worth, but we know that 1 times X is just X, so we don't write the 1. The 5s, we would count up the number of bills, which apparently is Y. We don't know how many bills that is, but we'd multiply by that denomination, which is 5, so we do need the 5 there. And then we would count up the number of 10s, which is Z. Z is the number of 10s. Multiply it by the denomination of a 10, and add that into all of that, and there's your first equation. Okay? The second equation, the next sentence does give you an equation, but I'm going to stop. I'm going to skip that for a second and just get to this next sentence that says that she has 23 total bills. So if I count the number of 1s that she had, which is X, add to that the number of 5s, which is Y, and then add the number of 10s, which is Z, that needs to be 23 bills total, right? So there's your second equation. Now your third equation comes from that middle sentence, and it says, if she had one more $1 bill, right? Well, one more $1 bill means that I would take the number that she has now, which is X, and add 1 to it. Then it says she would have just as many 1s as she does 5 and 10s combined, right? Well, 5 and 10s combined means we've got to take Y plus Z. And that sentence says is if she had one more 1, it would be the same as the 5s and 10s combined. So these guys would be equal. There's your third equation. Third equation is usually the harder one to come up with. Okay? But there's your 3 equations. You can use your calculator now to solve this. The only trick about your calculator is that all 3 equations have to be in the same format. They all have to have X, Y, and Z on the left-hand side and the constant on the right-hand side. And the X, the Y's, the Z's all have to be stacked up, right? So in other words, I'm going to have to subtract Y and subtract Z to move them over to the left side. And then I'm going to have to subtract 1 to move the 1 over to the right side. And this is kind of confusing. If it is, just take it a step at a time. I'm just going to do all these steps at once. Because I know this is going to give me the 0, this is going to give me 0. And I'm just going to have negative 1 on this side. That's going to give me 0, and I'm going to get X minus Y minus Z. So you might have to move some things around to get your third equation to look like the first 2. Okay, or whatever. Just make sure that your X, Y's, and Z's are on the left side and your constant is on the right side. And now when you type in your third equation into your matrix, you got to type in 1, negative 1, negative 1, negative 1 for that row. Okay? And then, like I said, you type in to your matrix, and what you should get is, so she should have 11 1s, 7 5s, and 5 10s. Okay? But once you get the equations, solve it however you want. If you want to do it by hand, you can do it by hand, but use your calculator to be a little bit quicker. Okay? All right. Try your hand at writing the equations for number 5. Stop the video and then start it back up and see how you're doing. Okay, I'll walk you through it. So my 3 variables, we need to know what 3 numbers are. We don't know what any of the 3 numbers are. So X is the first number, Y is the second number, Z is the third number. First sentence is where your first equation comes from. If you add the 3 numbers up, you should get negative 2. That's easy enough. Second equation says the sum, which means add. If you take the sum of 3 times the first, which is 3 times X, twice the second, and then the third, so you're not going to multiply the third by anything. But if you do that, you should get 9. And that's just coming from this sentence here. The last sentence gives you your last equation. The difference, now we're going to subtract, between the second number, which is Y, and half the third. So Z over 2, or 0.5Z, that difference is going to be 10. Okay? Now, how do you put a fraction into your calculator? Well, for right now, what I would tell you is to just make this 0.5z. And then you can type it in here. Make sure that you put a 0 in for that x, right, in that third equation. So to go solve that, you should get the first number to be 3, the second number to be 5, and the third number to be negative 10. Okay? So there you go. All right, one more example for you. We'll try to write these equations again, stop the video, try to set them up and see how you do. I'll walk you through my thought process on how I got my equations. Okay? Okay, so question is, what kind of fruit did you sell the most? We're talking about selling pounds of apples, oranges, and bananas. We don't know how many pounds of any of these that we sold. So those need to be our three variables, the pounds of apples. Remember that your variables stand for pounds, right? Well, first of all, sifting through this, $2 per pound for apples, 5 for oranges, and 3 for bananas. We're going to use that. The next sentence says you sold 60 pounds of fruit total. So if I take my pounds of apple, which is X, add to it the pounds of oranges and bananas, that should equal my total number of pounds, which is 60. Now, the money, 60 pounds of fruit, apparently gave me $180. So my next equation is all about money. So I'm going to replace the 60 with 180 because that's how much money I got from 60 pounds. Now the way I come up with that total, I'll take the money that I made from apples. To figure that out, I take the pounds that I sold, which right now is X, and multiply the price per pound, which is 2. Same thing for the oranges. Take the amount of oranges you sold, multiply by its price per pound, and get 5y. And then the last one is going to be 3z. Okay, and then it says you sold 10 more pounds of apples than bananas. That means that if you were to take the pounds of bananas, you'd have to add 10 to that to get your pounds of apples, because apples is 10 more than bananas. So apples is 10 more than bananas. Oh, sorry, bananas is z. And there you go. There are your three equations. Remember that you've got to move the z over in the third equation. So subtract z. So this is your third equation. Also remember that you have to put a 0y in for your matrix if you're going to use your calculator. Okay? So put those into your calculator. You should get 28 pounds of apples, 14 pounds of oranges, and 18 pounds of bananas. Okay, that's how you can figure out how many pounds of each you sold. Which one did you sell the most? Obviously, you sold apples the most. Okay? There you go. Those are sort of my thoughts on how to come up with some equations from a story problem. Try these yourself in your homework, and we'll go over any questions you got next time.